Hello and welcome to On the Kerbs. I am kind of your host, Thiemo Albers Daly, and the reason I'm saying kinda is because today is, as you're listening to this, the 100th episode of the On the Kerbs podcast, which means decided to do things a little bit differently. So we've flipped the script a little bit, and I've brought in a good friend of mine and of the Undercut podcast fame, Jacob Phillips, to come and interview me, which this is either going to go really, really well or really, really badly. So we're about to find out. But either way, it's a fun way to mark episode 100. So, hello, Jacob. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Do you know what, Tima? I'm doing amazingly. It's been a great Christmas. I hope you've had a good Christmas as well, and to all the listeners. And what an absolute pleasure it is to be invited onto the 100th episode of On the Kerbs. And today I'm delighted to be your host. So I'm going to make sure I grill you with a few questions and get to the bottom of, why the On the Kerbs podcast has been so successful and some of the topics and guests you've covered as well. So all I can say is, Timo, thanks for having me on.
It's going to be a very surreal experience, but you're very welcome for being the one to put me through my paces.
It's a shame you can't see our two beautiful faces, but we'll have to go with audio for today.
Yeah, that's it. Leaves the listener with a rich imagination, at least.
So, Timo, I'm going to delve straight into the 100th episode, and what a way to get started with the first question being that I've got for you today is, so what got you into motorsport? I know you've got a rich motorsport background. You've covered, many different formulas, many different genres of motorsports. But where did it all start for you many years ago?
So it's an original question. I like it a lot. I don't know where you got it from, but I like it.
No idea.
It's just it's always been there. It's kind of thing. It's one of those things you look back on your life a little bit, and you're like, what are these constant things that have always been there without you really noticing? And Formula One, as it has been for many people, was just always there in the background for me. And remember watching it. I've said to you countless times that growing up, I kind of remember Michael Schumacher being the first kind of notable driver that I can remember seeing going around the track. Kind of definitely not during his prime, I don't think. Probably more during the Alonso years. But it was interesting to see that, and it kind of
Yeah.
just continued on from there. And it just kind of became habitual. You just watched it every Sunday, and it didn't really occur to me if the racing was good or bad. You still watched it. It didn't matter if you were in the Vettel dominance, the Lewis dominance, or anything else. It's Sunday. There's a Grand Prix on. You watch it. That's just the law.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like going to church on a Sunday back in the day. But going back to those times, yeah, I don't think personally, from my personal standpoint, I don't ever remember sort of caring about the races. Obviously, now we're very critical, especially on the Undercut podcast. You've reviewed the season, which was fantastic. But back in those days, certainly for me, and as you said there as well, it didn't really matter what the racing was like. There was two rules really on a Sunday. Number one, you watch the Grand Prix, and number two, the red cars always won, and that's all it seemed to be really. And
Pretty
obviously
much.
those V engines as well. But certainly for me, that's where it started for me. Certainly, I remember Alonso being the first name that I sort of come across, and obviously Schumacher there as well. I remember Button's first win in 2006, but beyond that, I can't really tell much apart from, I am now hooked for life, and it's become a sort of an addiction, if you like. And every Sunday, what I'll be doing? I won't be going outside. I'll be watching the F1. That'll be the same for many years to come, I'm sure.
And it's very much an addiction that has spiraled out of F1 into a plethora of other motorsport things, which is how we got onto everything else we'll probably get into in this chat. But this kind of Formula One was very much a gateway drug, if you like, to the rest of the motorsport world. And lockdown as well, a couple of years ago, kind of boosted that a little bit with the junior formula, getting into there, having the time to finally look and explore these things a little bit more and explore them. But it was kind of, as much as I enjoy everything else, F1 is always weirdly the priority. If there's ever a clash on a weekend, it's conflicting for a moment, but then it's like, well, regardless of what's happening in F1, it doesn't matter how dominant a season might be for any particular driver or how dull a circuit might be that we think the race is not going to be worth watching. You're still there watching it. So it's very much a first love thing there, but no regrets whatsoever.
No regrets whatsoever. And I'll give a little insight to the viewers here. And I don't think I've told many people this before, but I'm this addicted to F1 that I have rearranged holiday dates to watch a race. I've rearranged family plans. I've rearranged.
That is the correct way of arranging things.
Exactly. But, I think I can't remember what race it was. I think it was a pretty down race, pretty boring race. So sort of egg on my face at the end of it. But at the end of the day, we love F1. Me and Thiemo occasionally use the phrase, we're married to F1. So no matter what happens, and the 2022 season was certainly for me one of the most boring seasons I've ever watched. And I think Thiemo agrees with
It was a
that
challenging year for the
sentiment.
marriage. It was a challenging year.
You look elsewhere, but you're still very faithful to your marriage. But you can't help but think that you might, maybe it's the grass is greener on the other side, but you still come back home, and that's how it's always been for me. But certainly on the point you've touched on there, you've ventured into many other different forms of motorsport. You've done your, you watch your Elms. You've got the WEC. We've ventured into IndyCar, which we'll touch on in a bit, but. What was the launch pad for On the Kerbs? Where did it all start, and what was your sort of inspiration behind it, if you like?
Well, to go to On the Kerbs, you've got to go via Drive Tribe, interesting enough, which back in, when was it now? I want to say March or April time, 2019. I'd come back home from, honestly can't remember where, and was just checking my phone. And there was a YouTube video from James May, which I'll put a link to in this bit of the chat actually, because it's still up. And it was James May talking about how to become a motorsport journalist. And I was like, well, let's have a look at that. That could be fun, because I think I'd got an idea that I'd like to write about it, but I had absolutely no clue whatsoever about how to do it, where to do it, and all the rest of it. And I think there's a couple of articles, if you scroll back far enough, on LinkedIn of all places, where I reviewed the Australian, the first couple of races anyway for 2019. Very much just race reports. Not particularly exciting reading, but factually very correct. And so I watched this video and he said, I'll just go on Drive Tribe, because if we'd had this back in my day, I'd probably like jumped up to stardom or a bit more fame a lot quicker. So I had a look at that. I signed up for Drive Tribe and then just started writing on there, which I forget if you were around in those days and if you ever saw any of that, but we can touch base on that in a moment. But so I was writing for there for ages, and then was watching one of the Grand Prix later that year in November time, I think it was, and they were doing a feature on Team Brit, the all-disabled racing team based in the UK, who they want to basically get to Le Mans on merit, no handouts. They just want to earn it and show that they can do it as well as anyone else can. And I was interested in that, and I thought that'd be a fun article to write about. So I found the email for the PA, I think, not PA, yeah, the media person anyway, Lucy something. I apologize for forgetting your name now. But emailed her saying, I'd like to do a bit of writing on this, maybe, just see what you think. And she just came back with, do you want to talk to the drivers? And I'm like,
hell yeah.
Yes, please. I would. Yeah, I'm not going to really say no to that. And so I then had, I think, 4 or 5 drivers who were like, okay, just let us know where and when you want to do. And I'm like, I have no idea. I've never interviewed any. Well, I virtually not really interviewed anyone at that point in my life, barring maybe a couple of things for university. And I thought, well, I've got to figure this out now. So I think this is how basic we're going here. Skype was the first thing I used for a recording, for the video recording.
I remember that in the uni days.
Yeah. So first 2 or 3 episodes, I think, are all on there. And I then thought, well, I need to put it somewhere. So I just thought, right, YouTube channel would be a good idea for that. Just to bung it somewhere, you can have a link, so then I can just link it in the Drive Drive article. You can watch it there, and it doesn't really matter, and we'll just see what happens. And I remember I was out for a walk one day, and just On the Kerbs just came to me naturally, and I thought, surely that's got to be taken already. It's an original thing, but surely it was 2019, 2020 at that point. It's like, well, this isn't going to be. Was it 20? I'm forgetting the year now. I think it might have been even 2020 and going into 2021. I forget how long I've been doing this now. I think it was going into 2021, actually. Forgetting my own history, how professional of me on my own podcast. It's not as if I've been doing this for the last couple of years. Anyway, and I checked and I couldn't find anything on the Kerbs related anywhere. So I thought, well, I'll just have that then. And then I just kind of started messaging people, be like, can I interview you? And stupidly enough, people said yes.
That's the thing, isn't it? When I started sort of moving into motorsport journalism, and I used to do a sports journalism degree. I used to work for a newspaper in Bristol, and that's how you'd always touch base. And I'd say for if anyone's listening out there who wants to potentially, like Thiemo, move into motorsport broadcasting, motorsport journalism, or just wants to start a fun hobby for yourself, if you like, maybe even starting with a new F1 season, the bit of advice I can certainly give you is just email these people, phone these people. The worst answer you're going to get is no. And I'm sure, Thiemo, along the way, you've got, you're a very ambitious fella. I'm sure you've tried to get, some fantastic stars on, but, I'm sure occasionally you've had the odd no as well. So never be afraid to say no is something.
It's a weird thing, actually, that I definitely say just go and chance it. You never know. The worst thing you're going to get is a no, but the majority of the time, I don't even get no. It's just you either get a yes or you just get ignored, which is kind of for a lot of it isn't even deliberate ignoring. I don't think they just don't maybe see the email or they don't see the message. But a lot of the time, it's ridiculous how many yeses I've gotten from just slinging my hook in and seeing, and just completely random people, like people that you may not know, people that you definitely do know, and then just being, yeah, I'm up for that. Let's sort it out. And not every single interview has come to fruition, but a lot of them have said that they've been interested at the very least. And it's just kind of, if there was a little bit of planning here, then that would have happened. So it's quite encouraging and nice that, I don't know if it's a case of social media having the impact that it has on motorsport, that is possible, that people are more open to that than they were maybe 10, 20 years ago, but it's encouraging.
Maybe even. So you mentioned there, going back to 2019, Thiemo, obviously you were surprised that the On the Kerbs handle wasn't available. And I think that was sort of the time when, F1 and certain other motorsports as well sort of took off, if you like. We had the pandemic, which helps, Drive to Survive as well, which brought loads of fans into F1 and the motorsport world. But, I'm a teacher. I teach kids in a primary school. I go down the pub quite a lot, and I hear people have these conversations about motorsport. Some of the children in my class, talk to me about F1, and say, "Oh, did you see the race at the weekend? Did you see that? Which driver do you like?" And these are certain things that I don't remember a few years ago. I think it's certainly quite a good time for motorsport, and no doubt it's sort of helping your content as well, Thiemo.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I mean, it's one of the things. There's a lot of people that I chat to on the podcast where they may not be known to a lot of people. They're kind of starting out, or they're just getting established, and you're more likely to get people to come and have a look at that because they've already, like I was saying earlier, F1 has been the gateway drug for them as such. And for continuing the analogy, they're more likely to try out these other bits and pieces. So it certainly helps on that respect, and in turn it helps them out a bit more as well. And you see that with not only the people that I chat to, but then some of their careers and how they've got started. It's been in the last few years, and they've been able to do this because the money's been there or been more easily obtainable in motorsport terms, as much as that is possible. But more people are willing to take chances on them and maybe sponsor them or give them a chance at something, or give them track days or give them some equipment or anything like this, because you've just got a more socially conscious environment for it all now. So it's a good opportunity, and you just got to you still got to cut through a lot of the crap that is out there, because there is a lot of it. I mean, I only listen to 2 or 3 other F1 podcasts beside the ones that I'm on. And even then, it's kind of, they're short enough or they're good enough for me to want to be able to commit to them, because there's still so much out there where it's more of a hassle. And
yeah, quite repetitive. Some of it is obviously there's only so much that can be said and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you do get a lot of that. It's a lot of, this is what happened, here's what happened, goodbye. Whereas you were there for the opinions, and it's a great platform that people can now go and express themselves a lot more. And you do have that all possible because more people are interested in it. But at the same time, it does bring a lot of baggage with it it is fat that needs to be trimmed. But I think for an experiment that we didn't really know where this was going to go in terms of not just my podcast, because again, I just kind of made it out of necessity. I need to put this interview somewhere, and it's kind of spiraled a little bit from there to everyone having an opinion on F1. It's going to take a time for that to balance itself out, but it's nice that we're in that environment at least where you can succeed and you can experiment a good bit, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't go brilliantly all the time. I mean, some interviews I've had, I don't think I've ever had a bad interview. They've just been ones that have been not as good as others. It's going to be the nice way I'll put that.
But I think it almost comes down to, certainly when I've spoke to people as well, and you would have certainly found this, it comes down to the quality of the guest, really. You can
Yeah.
ask the best questions in the world. You can be the most interesting chap. You can have all the charisma in the world. But if the person you're interviewing doesn't want to speak, then, well, the interview's probably not going to go well either.
You can try it out a little bit, and you can. It's like you say. It doesn't matter if the driver is there or not with you, or whoever you're talking to. It's not if they're not the most comfortable or they're not used to being interviewed or whatever. At least you can try this out, and chances are that for those ones, especially if they're earlier on, they're not going to get listened to as much, and that's okay-ish. You don't mind not being an immediate sensation because it gives you time to learn the ropes as such and build from there, and somehow, as we're saying at the top of this, get to 100 episodes.
Yeah, and you've come fantastically. To get to 100 episodes is a great milestone. So in that
Very
time,
stubborn.
a lot of persistence. But one thing I will say is going forward, you've interviewed, I'm the 100th guest you've interviewed, or technically you're the 100th guest that's been interviewed on this podcast. Going through, like you said, there would have been some that, maybe weren't so good to interview, but on the top of your head, and you might have a few contenders for this, maybe even a top three if you like, who is the best guest that you've interviewed on the Kerbs?
We do love a top three, don't we?
We do love the top three. And the bottom three as well. Not that we're going to do that
today. Yeah, I don't want to piss anyone off unnecessarily for once. So it'd be not making
it's Christmas, mate. Please don't do that.
It's weird because on one hand, it's kind of like there's people that I've talked to where I'm like, how the hell am I talking to you right now? Your Carlos Sainz seniors being the prime example of that. I remember getting confirmation for that interview and thinking, I'll believe that's happened once I've done it and I've ended the call because I don't believe I'm actually going to talk to him.
Yeah, that's a pinch of something, that isn't it?
It was a little bit, and especially because my interview style, it's very mullet style where I serious at the front and then fun at the back, and it's just kind of you got towards the end and I'm just talking to him about he's talking about cooking me pasta if I ever come over, and I'm like, yeah, because that's just casually going to happen.
Did he mention the type of pasta that he was going to cook you?
Well, I think I asked him, is there a meal that you can cook better than anyone else, or kind of like you've got a signature dish? And he just had like this simple. I can't remember don't remember if it said the Italian brand of pasta exactly, but it was just kind of Italian thing. Nice bit of homemade tomato sauce going on that, and just very simple thing. I just thought, what, that sounds all right to me. I'm not going to blame. I'm not going to ask the man to make me something else. He's offering me food here, and this is already surreal enough as it is. So.
Exactly. Sounds delicious. Sounds delicious.
But it's like the rest of the interview was great, but I was just kind of thinking that's just a bit weird. And then I do think early doors it was weird because still finding my feet and everything. Because I'd had one of the drivers from who was with Team Bird at the time on, but then my next interview was Katie Munnings and Timmy Hansen, just as they were about to start their Extreme E journey, which that was weird. And then off the back of that, I managed to talk to I think it was the LMP2 winners for the European Le Mans series in 2020. Just like that's episode 5 or something silly. I've got all 3 of them on the podcast. I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. And I've just got to juggle 3 guests at once. And I've just I wasn't as into the European Le Mans series as I am now. So I was kind of still learning about it. I'm like, I'm probably not going to appreciate how fun this is to be talking to these 3 people until a long time from now. And sure enough, this year I'm like, yeah, I don't know how I got them like early doors. But in terms of best interview, I think it's like you're saying, there's these certain people where, because for the majority of the time, the length of the episode is how long I've talked to them face to face as such. There's some messaging and emailing beforehand, sure, but that's obviously not the same thing as having a conversation with someone properly. So it's when you have that kind of chemistry or you immediately get on with that person, that's always reassuring because it's just so weird to have that from my point of view because it's just little old me and then there's whoever it is on the other end of the microphone. I'm trying to think who we've got on that one now. There was Austrian TV presenter, F1 presenter Karina Camper. She and I got on pretty well straight off the doors. That was a fun interview there. There's the F4 driver who from Uruguay, Nati Cesares, which I've probably butchered the name. I do apologize again, but again, just really friendly and good fun there. Tanner Faust, ridiculous. I mean, I know he's well trained with interviewing and he's seasoned professional, but just ridiculously nice guy and just very easy to get on with. and you just think, what's going on here?
I mean, I think the thing I certainly find is, and I'm sure you find it as well, is you interview these people, you email them and you arrange a meeting and stuff, and you'll say, oh, we're only going to spend 30 to 40 minutes on this, and then you end up 2 or 3 hours later and you're still speaking to them, and that's certainly
I've had a couple of
Thiemo
those.
messaged me yesterday saying, have you got 30 or 40 minutes to spare? And I cleared my diary for the next 3 hours because I knew that we're not going to be speaking for 30 to 40 minutes. But some interviews, going back to the bad guests, which we're obviously not going to name, you will think, well, 30 minutes is maybe enough. But some people, you speak to, and they've got, you speak about the motorsport, but this is the thing we like to talk about the most. But it then transpires into, like you say, pasta stories and stories about holidays and their favorite TV shows and all these kind of colloquial stuff that on the face of it, when you watch them on TV and you watch the coverage and stuff, you don't really get a flavour for that. So that's why, for me personally,
no, it's definitely my USP.
Yeah, exactly. But certainly, going forward as well, it's just great to get an insight and flavour. What would you say the weirdest story you've potentially heard from a guest was? Maybe the passive one might be up there. I don't know, and hopefully I've not stolen your thunder with that one. But is there any other
weirdest.
sort of like colloquial stuff that might be mentioned there that's a bit like, oh, that's a bit interesting?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I'm just trying to think. So I've been going back through all the episodes up to now, just having a little look. It's quite funny because YouTube has the timestamps, and it's funny what it picks up for some videos as being a notable moment. It's tricky. I remember not realizing that Alex Brundle had a girlfriend, and then asking him a question about what would you put on a dating app profile, and him trying to answer that very diplomatically. There's more funny necessarily than weird. I think the weird one is just when it's, and again, it's a classic me question, but whenever it always catches people out way more than I expect it to, even after the 10th or 12th time. It's the classic, would you rather fight 100 duck-sized horses or a horse-sized duck? You can be talking about about motorsport for half an hour, 40 minutes or whatever, but as soon as you ask that question, they suddenly they freeze and they think, oh, I don't know actually. And I think the best answer I got to that one, the one that I enjoyed the most actually, was Sebastian Loeb, which kind of was not on the Kerbs, but was for written interview, where he said, well, I wouldn't like to fight it because I like animals, but I'd very much like to meet it. And I just thought, that's weird for me, because I've managed to get him to not only answer that question, but he's given a brilliant answer for that.
That's funny. That is funny, to fair. Yeah, no, it's great, isn't it? Talking to all these guests, you get a flavour of certainly different, forms of motorsport as well, because you've interviewed guests from, a plethora of different motorsports, different categories. And we'll go back to motorsport for the next question, because that is what we do best. 2022 was a very interesting year in motorsport itself. For me personally, I'm a massive F1 fan, and obviously, those who may have listened to the Undercut podcast might have seen me on there a couple of times and might have sort of got a grips of my love for Formula 3. I think it's a fantastic feeder series. But what would you say was your favourite form of motorsport to watch in 2022? And I know what your answer won't be.
That's a nasty question, but I like it. Oh, it's tricky. It's tricky. IndyCar was very enjoyable this year. It was better than Formula One, which
absolutely loved it.
Feels blasphemous to say. But that was.
If you said that
enjoyable.
to me 3 years ago, Thiemo, I would have, not that I knew you 3 years ago, but I would have laughed at you, and I would have laughed at anyone saying that, because I used to think IndyCar was, for want of a better phrase, shite. But it has really impressed me this year. And quickly, before we move on, I don't want to interrupt you, but do you reckon it was because F1 was so bad this year that IndyCar sort of, it made it look better, or was it just good racing? Because I feel it was just good racing.
It was a combination of both. We were promised a lot for F1, and it didn't really deliver outside of the first 2 or 3 races. And IndyCar, we just kind of gravitated towards it because there were drivers there that we finally knew. Enough people there, Callum Ilott, Christian Longardio, Tatiana Calderons, that we could have a little bit of skin in the game without it being too much of a time commitment. Like you said, we didn't watch every race live as it happened, but we'd catch up on the highlights and we'd pay attention to the championship. And the fact that it went down to the final race and there's still at least 4 drivers up for the title just kind of made that much more exciting. And I think because we didn't have any expectations for it, it was able to exceed it a lot there, especially as, like you were saying before, we'd not rated it terribly highly before then, rightly or wrongly.
Probably wrongly.
But Yeah, so I think it was a combination of the two. But in terms of the one I enjoyed the most, it's I think just because it's such a short season spread out, but it was very enjoyable for me, especially because it was very much bigger and bolder in a sequel sense was Extreme E. It had a little bit of everything this year, including just an insane final round where literally Rosberg X Racing, they just it was theirs to lose, but they had to have the worst weekend possible to lose it. And spoilers, they did. And the other three teams that could have all won it still made it bloody difficult for themselves to get one of them to beat them, but they just managed it. And you still had a fairy tale podium that didn't impact anyone else. So you got a little bit of everything. Everyone, bar the championship contenders of Rosberg Racing, had an absolutely brilliant weekend. And it was just very great door to door wheel bashing racing. So overall, we need longer seasons from it, but I understand why we don't. But for me, that was the top tier of it this year. And unless I'm forgetting something else, but I don't think I am. So I'm going to move on quickly before I remember something.
Yeah, no, I'd take that as an answer. I'm personally not into Extreme E, but it's a good,
We'll get you there, Jacob. We'll get you there.
Yeah, you'll get me there. You've nudged me several times, and I've sort of pushed you away a little bit.
Well, I'll tell you what does get a runner up actually now. I just thought of it. Nitro RX. That has been a lot of fun. I remember just saying back to me nudging you there. I was going to say,
yeah,
just having a look at that over the off season, but it's been a lot of fun.
I'm getting there, Thiemo. I'm getting there. We got a long winter break. We got 3 long months.
All I'll say is it's very F1
sure
2012 vibes in that we think in the first 7 rounds we've had 7 different winners. So it's been very nice.
And I'd need that back in my life. I can tell you that for nothing. Quickly, what let you down most in 2022 in terms of motorsport? It was billed as a big year across many different forms. What would you say? What let you down the most? What was your biggest disappointment?
I mean, that's an easy question. It's the F1 regulations. It didn't really. I mean, maybe they need a little bit more time to kick in properly, but for supposedly an era where everything was going to be a lot closer racing, sure, we got closer racing, but it didn't change much of anything at all. And we had one of the most dominant seasons we've ever seen in Formula One. So that's an easy question. Biggest letdown right there.
Yeah, I think that's. Well, I knew what your answer was going to be, just so you could broadcast it to the listeners as well. Yeah, for me, I'd agree with that entirely. I think it was. I'm going to use the phrase again, so you might need to get your bleeper machine ready, Thiemo. But it was shite, to be fair.
Oh, I don't leave anything on this podcast.
Nice. Well, I might say something a little bit stronger for the F1 season then, but no, it was.
Oh dear.
It was.
I'll have to find out how to get a bleep machine.
No, I'm not going to trouble. We've already had too many technical difficulties today already. No, I thought it was rubbish, to be fair. Whether it was a case of the rules being bad itself or the fact that the top teams were just miles ahead of everyone else is still yet to be decided, I think. But
it kind of comes from my pre-season predictions. I was hoping for far too much, and not even the bare minimum happened there. So it's kind of the end of a Grand Tour episode. I was like, on that terrible disappointment.
We'll come back again and try again next year, and they will. We'll see what happens next year. But yeah, it was a damp squib. It really was. It was like a fireworks night that can't get started because it's rained off, and all those kind of things. It was a waterlogged pitch. It really wasn't a great season, to be fair. And I think it was a shame. I remember me and Thiemo talk quite a lot off a podcast. We voice note each other pretty much daily, mainly about F1 and other motorsport things. Usually a lot of repeats, a lot of crap. But we have a good time, don't we, Thiemo, talking about motorsport? And
yeah, get it out of our system so we can produce good quality podcasts where we don't ramble for too long.
An interesting story is, I reckon, so me and Thiemo have done, I don't know, maybe we haven't done that many. We've done about 5, I think, different things. We've done our own one. We've done, obviously, I've been lucky enough to be invited on the Undercut podcast a couple of times, and we were part of another podcast a couple of years ago that we talked about as well. But yeah, it's interesting fact is, really, I'd say, Thiemo, a couple of our podcast ideas have just come from us talking. Think, oh, hang on a minute, the FIA stewards, we're ranting about them. They're crap. That sounds like a good podcast idea, and lo and behold, it turned into a podcast. So it'd be interesting to see how sort of our topics of conversation and podcast topics start, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and it kind of goes off and goes hand in hand with On the Kerbs a little bit. There's been people I've talked to where I get on with them, and then I follow them on social media and I do a bit of this and that, and they're obviously going off and doing their own thing as well. But then I'd write something about them where I just think, this would be a fun idea. I don't know if it would ever happen, but I might as well put that idea out there. And it's just kind of like 7 drivers that should join Nitro RX. Again, it's why not just try and put that out there into the world and see what happens? Or remember, obviously, anyone who follows me on my Instagram page or watches or has watched this episode of On the Kerbs, it's the most successful one to date. The interview I had with Rebecca Boosie, I'm a big fan, and she's very much my driver. And I put an article together saying that her and Mark Webber should be a team together in Extreme because there's a new team joining there next year. And I did a whole article making my case for why both drivers should be there. It'd be a great combination in Webber as well. Just be great to see him back in a race car. And again, it doesn't require too much commitment from him because it's only about 5 or 6 rounds a year, depending. And she's up and coming, brilliant off-road driver, currently doing the Dakar as we speak. And it got a lot of traction, and a lot of people saw it, and a lot of people engaged with it, and a lot of people were then messaging her saying, "Oh, is this happening?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I wish." But it's just nice that I could help start that conversation and just keep it relevant. And it's silly how you just have a fun idea, maybe late at night as your mind is kind of winding down before you go to sleep, and you think, yeah, I might write something about that, or I might do a podcast on that, or that'd be a fun question to ask this person that I'm going to talk to. And it just spirals from there. And you never know how that's going to impact and have a knock-on effect down the line. So it's quite fun, but quite mad.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, our conversations last, can last days, and they do go round and roundabouts sometimes, but it is quite fun to sort of touch on those weird topics and then topics you don't really think about, and then the hard-hitting topics. And basically, the way I describe it and the way I'm sort of introduced on the Undercut podcast when I'm on is, the friendly guy down the pub. So it just ends up into a friendly sort of pub conversation. And that's how I feel motorsport conversation should be. Yes, there should be the serious stuff at the beginning, like the On the Kerbs sort of celebrates, if you like, the serious stuff at the beginning, but then going through, getting comfortable, getting relaxed, and then finding out other things as well.
Well, you want to know the person, don't you? You don't just want to be asked a question that anyone else can ask you. It's like, oh, how did the year go for you? Yeah, I'm asking that, but I'm also hoping that you give me something a little bit different, or you say something that I can pick up on, so we can get something different out of you that no one else has gotten. So it's just trying to have broad enough questions where you can pick something up in the answer to drill down on, and then have a proper conversation like you would like with anyone. It's kind of speed dating as you want, but with motorsport drivers.
Exactly, yeah. So we've mentioned all those sort of interesting anecdotes, if you like, about the other drivers and the stuff that they've told you, like the pastor story that we've heard before. What would you say is an interesting? You got any interesting facts that maybe the viewers or the listeners might not know because maybe you've not shared them before? Anything that any interesting facts about you, Thiemo?
About me, motorsport related stuff. Let me think. Well, it's just kind of you've put me on the spot, and I don't have an idea of how to answer it. I'm trying to think now. What's interesting? I don't. Again, this is what you get when you stick a host on the other end of it, and they don't know how to answer a question. Maybe this is how everyone's been feeling for the last couple of years. Whenever I've been talking to them, it's finally coming back to bite me on the ass.
Karma's a bitch, as they say.
It is. It is. Interesting. I don't know. It's kind of. I feel like I'm just very much straight down the middle on everything there. It's kind of On the Kerbs got born out of a necessity for something, and I just went and did it. So it's just kind of, I suppose, I'll let you decide if it's interesting or not, but never let my lack of knowledge about something or my inexperience in a certain field deter me from deciding I'd still want to go and do it. Like I said near the beginning of this episode, I had no idea how I wanted to get into the motorsport world as such. I knew I enjoyed watching it, and I knew I wanted to talk about it, but it wasn't until James May turned up that I suddenly had a path for it. And I suppose the interesting thing is there that I see an opportunity, and I will do my best to maximize that. And that's how I got very decent following on Drive. Probably got stupendously high views on some of the articles. I mean, again, some of it is timing with breaking news. I remember there was the article that I wrote. It was about 10 minutes after it was announced that Bottas was going to be leaving Mercedes, and very much it hadn't been 100% confirmed that George would replace him yet. I mean, we all knew it, but it hadn't been confirmed. So this was just an article saying Bottas is leaving. and that got something stupid like 90,000 hits in less than 24 hours, and a stupid amount of comments, and it was just ridiculous. And I thought, this is just from good timing and reporting. But then the amount of people looking at that and reading that and like, oh, who's this guy? Let's have a look. And I got a bunch of followers jumped based off of that. And then when I'm writing these other pieces where, like I was saying just now, these passion pieces as such, from just here's a random idea that would be fun if it happened, more people to look at it then, and you kind of get yourself out there more. So I suppose interesting in that I just don't let it stop me, and I will go and learn what I need to learn, and hopefully that comes across.
Yeah, I think that's a very good message. Actually, and it sort of goes back to what I was saying earlier about you get a no, you can get setbacks in this world, but it's all about persevering, carrying on forward, and finding out what works best for you. And it's almost a trial and error game as well. I remember
that was
years
very
ago.
much a trial and error thing, when the kind of just rugged determination was very much how so many episodes of this podcast got made this year. I remember at the beginning of the year, I thought it'd be a nice challenge to see if I could get a podcast out every single week. So I'd have 52 episodes come the end of the year. And somehow I think I've got 55, which I'm not entirely sure how that's happened. That's including the one we're doing at the moment. I remember I had Emma Gilmore and Lance Woolridge for Extreme E in the same week because it just needed to be done that way for it to stay relevant. But I've no idea where the rest of it came from, but it's just that kind of, yes, I got a lot of no's in the last year, but I still managed to find 50 odd people to chat to. And it's just kind of that keep going and going and going for it. And yeah, not everyone knows all of these people. And there's probably 2 or 3 in this year's catalogue that may never be seen again, sadly. But again, it's just trying to get the experience and get these people talking. And you get someone completely different that chances are no one's heard of, then you can be the person that maybe discovered them, and you're the person that they're diving back through the archives in years to come and like, oh yeah, we found this interview from 2022, and look how kind of novice and shy you were back then. Look how far you've come, and it's me that's been the person to do that. So that's just quite a fun thing to have as part of that, because you never know what's going to happen on that front.
You never know what's around the corner. I'm sure there'll be another 100 episodes coming your way in no time. But here's a question I've asked. I think I've asked Harry Redknapp this question, actually. So if you're not familiar with Harry, he is a football manager, famous football manager, famous for managing my team, Portsmouth, and Tottenham, and other teams as well. I think I asked him this question. I certainly asked someone else famous. Definitely was him, I think. So I'm also a big fan of darts. Surprise, surprise. Darts is a pub sport. I like being in the pub, as I might have mentioned a couple of times already on this episode in the last half an hour.
Once or twice.
Darts is famed for having sort of, they have their own personalities, the darts players, and they all come onto a song. It's known as a walk-on music. If you're a darts player, Thiemo, what would your walk-on song be? So what would be your anthem, if you like, your tune? What would get the crowd going? What music represents you? What would get you going?
See, the trouble is there, you said, what song do you want to come on? And then you also said, what would get the crowd going? And I don't know if those two are mutually exclusive with what I was thinking of.
I don't know. Actually, think about it, probably not. So I made the question harder than it was meant to be. But
ooh. Well, I was trying to think of something comical like the Benny Hill theme tune, just walk onto that, because that's probably as well as the darts is going to go for me.
Yeah, you might fall over the stage as you walk up.
Nah, I don't know. Maybe I'll go for something classic and a little bit cheesy. I'll go for the Rocky theme tune, the main theme for that, because I think that's a good representation of what it feels like at the moment, doing all these podcasts and building my little motorsport multiverse. It's kind of, yeah, it's hard at times, but when you get those wins, it feels very bloody nice, and you don't mind that. If you're taking the first Rocky film as a good example of that, you don't mind that you lost the fight because you went the distance, and you're quite happy that you managed to get there in the first place, which is at the same time what a lot of the drivers that I talk to, they're just happy that they managed to get where they are, and everything else after that is a bonus. So it's yeah, I'll go for that one. Go for the Rocky theme too before I delve into too much of a philosophical conversation there, because I know that's not what you intended.
Yeah, I'm not sure the darts world would expect such a philosophical sort of explanation there, but I think that might be one of the best answers I've ever had to that question. Actually, I think the answer I've probably got most
as well
is something like Sweet Caroline. I think obviously that's just a crowd pleaser, really.
I'm taking Stephen Merchant's line for that. I was like, I can't be doing with hearing that anymore at the moment. It's been overused too much for me now. I need to have a break from that song for at least 2 years, but I know I'm not going to get that.
I remember years ago, you'd hear the song every now and sort of like Mr. Brightside, if you know that song. I've been partied all around the world and that kind of thing, and you'd hear those songs occasionally. I think, oh, this is a great song. I love this song, and then you realise now it's just wearing you out. It's like the 2022 F1 season. It's grinding you down. You don't know if you can take any more of it, but you'll listen to it again.
You find a way somehow, though.
Not by choice. I don't think I'll listen to it by choice, but I will still watch F1 by choice. But do you know what? That is a fantastic answer, actually. And I don't know what I'd choose, actually. I keep changing my mind on it. So yeah, I'll come back to myself.
I'll let you have a think on that, and we'll get you one in 50 episodes time or something.
We'll be here all day. You've just given me an inspiration for a question going back to the pasta theme. It seems like you might want to title this episode "Pasta," episode number 100. What would you, if I was coming around for dinner, what would you cook me? Or not necessarily me, because you may or may know what foods I like. But what dish would you like to? What's your favourite sort of cuisine? What dish would you like to impress someone with?
I'll keep it simple because there's three things that I'm known for in amongst my friends for the cooking side of things. It's you can't go wrong with a naan bread pizza. Simple, efficient, bosh, everyone's happy. Or there's an absolutely monster lasagna that is going to be very messy but will taste very good. And then for dessert, there are some chocolate chip banana muffins.
That sounds like an absolutely fantastic 3-course meal. You made me hungry now, Thiemo. I wish you were actually cooking this and not just a question or a figment of my imagination. But that does sound. I
do feel sorry for you from a figment of your imagination.
I'm sure maybe one day we'll you'll be able to cook that for me. Maybe as a 200th episode celebration. Who knows? What would you say? We've got another big year of motorsport. Going back to motorsport here, we've got another big year of motorsport coming up. Obviously, you'll probably stay in touch with the same formulas, similar formulas. You might maybe even explore some new formulas that you've not checked out yet. What would you say you're excited for most in 2023? As we're only a few days away from it now, sort of the countdown is on, if you like. What is getting your appetite wet for motorsport most in this coming year?
Straight out of the gates, because it's the most. It's the event that's happening the soonest. Dakar. Just because last year I took a bit of an interest in it because of Rebecca, obviously. So first ever motorsport event, which I mean, side note, nuts that you choose that as your first ever motorsport event, but she did a brilliant job and finished it. So great for her, and she's back there again. So I've got skin in the game there. So I'm looking forward to that. It's extra long this year, so and you still got it's kind of I've got the personal thing there. But then you've got people like Nasser and Sainz and Loeb all competing in the top category as well. So there's a lot to look forward to there, and it's a real endurance. It's a proper endurance thing there. So I'm very much looking forward to that. ELMS, I've fallen quite a bit for. I do quite like it. I know I've said to you that there's a great YouTube Porsche series on focusing on Michael Fassbender's journey throughout that, which is a great watch, which helped get me into it a lot as well over the last couple of years. And then I think to round it out, I've got to stick with the Extreme because it just keeps building, and we get to go to new locations again next year, and you get to try a bit different. You've got some driver changes and teams, and you've got more of a fluidity there. So I'll be very interested to see how that all goes and see which drivers kind of stick around and which ones move. Because again, it's one of the things we've kind of noticed. This is one of the last few years of more women getting into motorsport, which is definitely fantastic if they should be. And Extremely is great for that. I mean, perfect example of that would be start of the season. I think it was for Excite Energy. They were supposed to have Clara Anderson come in as their driver. She got COVID last minute, and it was absolutely terrible. No symptoms or anything, just couldn't be there. Absolutely potluck. And in motorsport, you never know if you're going to get that chance again. If you fast forward to the end of the season, she's in the Apt Cupra team with Nasser Al-Attiyah of all people as her teammate, and they go and win the race. And it's just great to see that kind of zero to hero story there. So if we can get a bit more of that next year, and she can get a permanent drive in that team or a different one, it just makes it all that more exciting because you see drivers really coming up through the ranks who deserve it and are not just Draco Malfoying it as such and just buying their way in. They've actually got talent.
Lance Stroll. Cough. You can edit that out if you want. That's funny. Well, I can't remember what I was going to say now. You've totally taken off my train of thought. Oh yes, I remember now. So you mentioned Extreme E there, staying on a similar sort of similar formula, if you like. Just quickly touching on it, are you excited for Formula E's new sort of Gen 3 now, isn't it, going into Gen 3? Are you excited for their new kickstart, if you like, their new era?
Yeah, I am actually. I got back into Formula E in 2022. I had a couple of years off, but then I caught up with it a bit to see what I'd missed out. I think it's just due to life, basically, just not having the time for it. But got back into it this year. It's very good, very enjoyable, and another close championship there. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the difference will be with this next generation, if it's noticeable in any other way other than just looking at the cars and noticing, yeah, you look different. Couple of drivers in there that I wish maybe weren't there, and a couple of the drivers, especially with W Series being on the bubble a little bit, I would have liked a couple of them to have had the chance to migrate over there. I would have thought that like Marta Garcia or Emma Kimberliner would have been a great addition to one or two teams, and especially with McLaren coming in, I was hoping maybe we could have got another woman in there after they had Emma Gilmore and Extreme E. It would have been a nice thing for them to get a female driver in Formula E, and kind of good for Formula E as well, but don't have that just yet, unfortunately. But I'm looking forward to it. It's nice and close racing. They could do with maybe slightly wider tracks at times. You do have that issue, but at the same time, they have been able to prove that you can go racing in Monaco, so I can't be too harsh on them, and you can still have a good racing there because the cars are small enough to make it work. So it's the kind of street circuit stuff I want from F1, but different. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I would like. They went to Valencia, didn't they, a couple of years ago? Maybe 3 years ago now, and that was a nice sort of refreshing change. I did actually watch that race. It's one of the few Formula E races I have watched. Thiemo keeps nudging me towards
the split between F1 and Formula E there. Just to cut in, sorry, slightly there, is that you see F1 race in Mexico City this year, and aside from Ricardo doing Ricardo stuff, I honestly forgot it happened. You rewind back to Mexico in Formula E this year, best race this season. You had a Porsche 1-2 and an absolutely close battle between them and everyone else. And it's kind of like they just started the race, but for the entire time in terms of how close all the cars were to each other and overtaking left, right, and centre. And it just shows that it is doable. It's not the venues that are necessarily the problem. It's the cars that you have racing there, and it's very much certain cars suit certain places, and you need to figure it out instead of just adding every single location possible to a calendar and hoping for the best.
To keep it very topical, I'm going to say that or suggest that the F1 cars need to go on a slight January dart after Christmas because they are quite big, aren't they? So that is the problem, isn't it? We criticised Monaco. I think Monaco was actually all right in F1 this year, but the Mexico City race was absolutely horrible. In fact, Thiemo, damn you for bringing that back up. It springs back to memory now. All I've got is a picture of Ricardo in my head smiling his way through the field. But apart from that, it was crap. Yeah, I might actually touch base with Formula E myself this year. I've had a sort of a bit of a love-hate, more hate relationship with Formula E. I think it was that problem with the tracks, to be honest. I'm not the biggest fan of street circuits. Thiemo knows me quite well. I'm always critical of every time we sort of go to an F1 street circuit. Baku wasn't even that good this year. I don't actually mind Jeddah, funnily enough, but I think they do need to mix it up. And, I'm not,
It's just about experimentation and trying to get it right and accepting that some places aren't just going to work as well as you want them to, and realizing that maybe you shouldn't have signed a 5-year contract to go and race there ahead of time. Like, we'll take this by year basis and just see how the cars work first before we actually commit to you. Because, yeah, you might have a beautiful country and a beautiful city, but if the racing's terrible, then you're going to lose. You're going to get a lot of general viewers, but you're not going to have a lot of actual good stuff said about it by people who actually don't just want to rinse and repeat what everyone else says.
Well, whether they care about that or not, I think that's another.
Well, that's also true, and I'm probably being a bit too optimistic and naive there, but never mind.
What is your, so you're looking forward to, as you mentioned there, a few of those motorsport categories. What would you say your biggest wishes for 2023? What would make you happy as a motorsport, not even as a motorsport journalist, really, as a motorsport fan? What would make you content at the end of next year? We're talking this time next year, you think, well, that happened in 2023. I am happy that happens. I'm pleased to be a motorsport fan.
I have my incredibly high standards wish, and I'll have my realistic wish. So my absolutely high standards wish is that Daniel Ricciardo somehow ends up being 2023 F1 world champion. Just let me believe for a little bit. And my realistic wish is just that we get a very mixed up season of Formula One. I wouldn't mind as much if
Is that
Max and Red
realistic?
Bull still win. It's more realistic than Ricardo.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
I wouldn't mind if Max and Red Bull still win, as long as it's down to the last race and you have at least 2 or 3 other teams fighting for both championships alongside it. Because, yeah, you could say you had this problem with Mercedes before then, but that wasn't advertised as being a brand new era of close racing and regulations where everything's going to be mixed up so much. So I just want it to deliver on what it promised. And even if it has the same result, at least there was more of a fight for it. I just
Yeah.
like that.
If Max wins, but it goes down to the last race, I won't be too disappointed. But if we get another season like
I just
last
like him to
season,
win a championship properly.
yeah, I think that's maybe third time lucky. Who knows? But it would be nice for someone else to win it. Wouldn't it? Lewis to get a date, maybe Russell to get a
Carlos.
championship. Who knows? Perez might win a championship. I'm sure someone on this podcast has predicted that before.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing or not, if we've predicted that or if we've cursed it.
I think that's just your optimistic side coming out. The way I describe me and Thiemo as certainly motorsport fans and maybe F1 fans as well is we're both very similar. Our glasses are both half full or half empty. I say, Thiemo, you're the glass half full guy. I'm the glass half empty guy. But at the same time, we're both very realistic and we have very similar opinions. Would you say that's fair?
I'd say that's fair, and together we combine to at least make one glass of something that hopefully tastes all right.
I can be, yeah, it tastes all right. You might have another pint of it. You might come back for another episode, but I'd say I can be. Yes, you're certainly more positive than I. I can be quite negative at times,
I
but
have no
I
right
think the
to be,
F1
but
does
I've
it to
just
me.
got to be because otherwise it's depressing all the time.
Yeah, and come January the 1st, and when testing starts in February, I'm sure I'll be more glass half full, and after Bahrain, I'll be glass half empty. But we'll see how that goes. I'd agree with that. To be fair, my wish for well, actually, to be fair, my wish for Motorsport 2023 is the FIA and Liberty Media and the Formula One Management Group accept Andretti's, I'm going to say it correctly,
Ooh, that would
Andretti's
be nice as
bid
well.
onto the grid. That would be very nice. I'm hoping that the F1 Academy makes its mark and does out everything it's meant to do. I hope W Series comes back. I know it's meant to come back, but still a little bit skeptical with the financials around that. We'll see what happens there. It wasn't a great look at the end of last season when that went away. I hope for myself that I get into another form of motorsport, one of the ones that Timo's been nudging me for ages. I'm probably so
So I've
nudged
got
now.
plenty of recommendations.
I was going to say I've got a list full right next to me here. I think he's nudged me so many times I'm full of bruises now. But yes, that is my hope for 2023. And we get, overall, I'll bring it back to F1. I hope we have a fantastic season next year. And this time next year, we're talking about what a great season it was and the best season of all time. But, that is maybe a bit too much to wish for.
So I'll
But
just agree with the other three that you were saying before. It'd be great to see W Series back. F1 Academy, I hope it does what it's designed to, because again, there's some great drivers that I've talked to on here that I think would be perfect fit for in there. And like you say, it'd be nice to get Andretti in there as well and have a couple more seats available and keep it all going. So we're just trying to. I don't think what we want is unreasonable. It's just we want the best that motorsport can be, and we just keep challenging it to get there. And we've got between us, we've got the ideas and the drivers that we can put into all those seats. So why not just put us in charge of that already and let us make it happen.
yeah, so basically what Timo's saying is, give us the keys to F1 headquarters and we'll take over tomorrow, realistically.
Yeah,
Or if you want
pretty
to
much.
wait till the 1st of January, we're happy to wait till then. In fact, I'd like to wait till the 1st of January. I'm a bit busy tomorrow, so F1 can wait. But so so you've interviewed, like we said, loads of guests on here, 100 guests now. Is there anyone maybe you've got in the pipeline, or maybe not in the pipeline, let's say? Let's go with, who's your dream guest? Who would you love to have on here at some point? And maybe they're listening today or whenever it goes out. And maybe they'll think, you know what, I'll jump on that opportunity. So who do you want to interview most on this podcast? And it can be anyone in the world. Maybe not, well, obviously it's going to be motorsport, but yeah, anyone in the world.
Well, 2023 wise, it's going to be interesting to see. I don't think you're going to get as many episodes next year just because 52 plus was a lot to try and cram in. But I know that we're going to, I say we, like there's anyone else running this ship, it's just me. I know I'm going to get a couple of people that we've had on before and kind of touch base with them, see how they've been getting on, because there's been some exciting stuff happening there. And I know that there's a couple of interesting things in the pipeline for new people, which I will not say just yet because I have a terrible habit of jinxing these things, but it's a suitable tease anyway. As for, and then there's a couple of people where I've been close a few times to getting them, but then for whatever reason, I've not quite got there yet. And it'd be nice to kind of hunt them down a little bit. There was, you might be familiar, Jacob, with Willie T. Ribbs,
Yeah,
the
he
American
was.
driver. I've been close a couple of times, but just hasn't quite got there yet. So I'm hoping maybe next year that'd be nice to tick that one off the list. Just because the great documentary on Netflix, if anyone hasn't watched that, about his story, and I just think he'd be a good bit of fun to talk to, especially maybe around Austin time, because he loves Lewis, he loves the Circuit of the Americas, and Sky. I've talked to him a couple of times. It's good bit of fun.
He was in Miami as well, I think, doing the interviews, wasn't he, at the end of the race?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, actually, good point. With Miami, I just kind of blur over, to be honest.
I'm surprised I remember that, to be fair, but the only thing I do remember from that week.
In terms of dream interviews, Jensen would be nice. That'd be a good chat there. And get Brundle Senior on. Complete the set there. Get Martin Brundle on. That'd be. I would happily release a 3 hour long podcast with him, completely unedited, just because you'd know that anyone listening would listen to the whole thing and would not complain about it.
I think that'd be almost the final. That'd be the one person I'd want to be. That'd almost be the final sort of episode, wouldn't it? It's complete after talking to Brundle Senior. I mean, there's no one. I can't think of many more people I want to speak to more than him. So that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, you've got a couple of other people that I'm just thinking of now. Oh, that'd be fun, but I don't know how I'd go about that. Susie Wolf would be great to talk to. Claire Williams, kind of people who've been around for a while but still have a lot of potential left in whatever motorsport thing they choose to. Michael Fassbender as well. Sod it. While I'm here, I might as well say it. That'd be fun after watching 4 seasons of him racing Porsches to try and get to Le Mans, then to make it to Le Mans this year. It'd be great to know how. I mean, there's a guy who's got so many stories anyway, but then you can throw motorsport into the mixes with it as well. That's just going to be a lot of fun to talk to. So I think we'll leave him as the last one there for that one, because otherwise I'll just be here listing off hundreds and hundreds of people.
How about an On the Kerbs with Crofty?
I would like to talk to him, to be honest. I know this might surprise you slightly because I'm not necessarily his biggest fan, but I would like to chat with him and see, because I do remember seeing a clip where he's reading out tweets that had been sent to him, and it was all kind of not very helpful criticism, where it's just kind of, classic Twitter stuff. And I just think, I just want to actually ask him some proper questions and just see what his answers would be, because I just like to see what his opinion is on various things. And I can be very critical, but that doesn't mean I'm just going to be a complete arsehole about it. It's trying to find that balance and just get a proper conversation out of it. Because I know I said this on a Sky Sports piece I wrote recently. All the people on Sky Sports, I do like them. I just think that there are elements here that could be better or could be changed, and it's got nothing to do with personal feelings towards the people themselves. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make these days is, oh, you said something bad about Crofty's commentating, you must hate him completely. You're like, no, I don't know the guy. So it'd be interesting to talk to him.
No, exactly. No, I'd like to speak to Crofty as well.
Get a lot of hits anyway, depending on how I title that one.
I was going to say, could get a good thumbnail in there as well. You might be right away. Funnily enough, I actually read that article the other night when I was in bed the other night. I was bored. I was thinking, what can I read? That's a good article.
I'm happy to provide a service.
Other services are available, but yes, that article was quite good actually. It was quite good doing in depth and thinking about they've been in charge of F1 coverage for 10 years, and you kind of think, wow, has it really developed? And you kind of think, well, maybe it hasn't, but anyway, I'm sort of going off topic there, but that was very good. Just you mentioned that one because it was one of my favorite pieces you've ever written. Really. One final question from me, and I'm going to go all X Factor on you now, and Simon Cowell and Britain's Got Talent, but where do you see yourself? Where do you see yourself going forward? Where do you see yourself, and where do you want to take the sort of On the Kerbs? What's the future path looking like for you?
Well, considering that it started out of necessity and it's turned into something that's been quite fun, and discovering new people and giving them a chance that they might not have otherwise gotten for ages, at the very least, if at all. I would like to keep developing it. As much as I was saying just now, it'd be great to talk to people like Brundle Senior and Jensen Button and all these established figures. I feel like ideally a balance for me would be for every one of those people that I talk to, I'd have 4 or 5 new people that you may not know too much about or are coming up through the ranks, and trying to find that balance there. So you can come for these bigger, longer interviews, perhaps with the more established figures who they've got so much to talk about, and then you maybe have some of these shorter episodes where you can discover this new talent, and maybe they go somewhere, maybe they don't. But point is that it just helps them along a bit. So I would like to do more of that kind of thing, balance that out a little bit. Obviously, I'd love to work in motorsport. I'm not too fussed about which category at the moment. I mean, obviously, Formula One would be lovely, and if anyone's listening, I will happily take on that mantle. But then there's the other side of it. I do quite enjoy the writing side of it, and being able to just have my opinion get out there, not have to conform to any kind of standards like, oh, you can't say this about this team because of X reason. No, if they have a bad weekend or if they have a good weekend, I'm going to call it as I see it, and I want to just make sure that I'm able to do that, and to be able to have a big enough platform where I can make sure that that quality is continued and help other people to get up there as well that deserve it.
Very refreshing, isn't it?
Yeah, because I mean, you and I both know, both from Drive 5 Days and from Undercut Podcast guests that you've listened to, and from other people that we just know who are also trying to make it in this business, that it's not easy, and it's very unfair at times about who gets where. And it's just trying to make sure that you're going for quality over quantity. And if and when I can get to a position where I can help someone else come up a little bit further on and bring them with me, then I will. And if that happens to be on the journalism side of it, the podcast side of it, or if it's a driver, I'm like, oh, there's a seat open here. I know the person who's looking for drivers to fill the seat with. I'm going to suggest this person because I think they'd be a great fit. So I very much want to do that. I want to work with some drivers, which maybe not. I have something in the pipeline there. I guess you'll just have to wait and see. And yeah, kind of have the nice blend. I want to be able to just, as long as I can speak my mind, as long as people are having good conversations with me about it, and we're not just mudslinging for the sake of it. Like, I'm happy to have a massive argument as long as we can remain relatively civil about it. And we don't even have to agree at the end of it, but I just want to have a nice, proper, open dialogue where you're not just getting somewhere for the sake of you've got a lot of likes and not much going on in terms of substance. I want there to be quality and not quantity. As long as that's happening, then, and that's happening across all 3 podcasts, that's happening across all the sites I'm writing for and on the Instagram stuff, then I'll be happy.
Yeah, I think when you're sort of throwing mud at certain things and criticizing certain things, it's all about, for me, when I've certainly done my reports and appeared in the newspaper, you've got to have substance, you've got to have facts to back it up. And that's what, reminds me of our Mazepin piece we did ages ago. You remember? That was that's probably the most, certainly with you anyway, the most critical piece I remember doing. That a lot of that was, it wasn't just fiction, was it? It was, okay, opinion, if you like, but we had a lot of ammo to back it up, if you like. But I think that's the main thing, isn't it, really? If you are going to
common sense and logic.
Common sense, logic, and, there'll be other things thrown in there as well. But, that guy wasn't very happy about it, was he?
Oh, no, I remember the comments on that now, yeah. They were quite amusing to read.
So if you don't really know Thiemo that well, he can best be described as that damn pundit. But
I've been called a pundit once, and the last thing I will say before we round up, actually, I wrote an article a few weeks ago about some drivers that should be in F1 Academy, and one of them was on the driver that I was saying about earlier, Mati Cesares, Uruguayan US Formula 4 driver, and someone down in South America saw my article and kind of did their own article based off that, quoting me and my article in there about her, kind of giving her a bit more press, which in the first place I was kind of astounded by, because I've just found this quite accidentally and found it quite amusing. The most amusing bit after that was, as you were saying, Jacob, that I get called pundit there, but on this one, I was referred to as renowned motorsport journalist. So I think I may have slightly made it.
I was going to say, even without the last 2 words, the word renown just resonates with.
It was just a nice touch.
Yeah, you'll be surprised what me and Thiemo have probably been called, and a lot of it's probably not broadcastable. The pundit was the one thing that I remember that made me laugh the most, sort of back with me and Thiemo's exchanges. I'm going to do a little bit of plugging for you here, Thiemo. Actually, this has been a very refreshing episode, and this is what me and Thiemo sort of specialize in. Really, is refreshing conversation about motorsport. If you're listening to this and you haven't yet listened to the Undercut podcast, I'd go over there and check it out, because for me, and if you're looking for a podcast that maybe doesn't have bias towards certain drivers and isn't afraid to say what needs to be said sometimes, is please go and check out the Undercut podcast, because that would be the podcast for you. So if you're ever looking for a podcast, if you're bored at the end of an F1 weekend and want that inside analysis to what has just happened, please go and check it out with Thiemo. And Thiemo, anything else you want to add to the Undercut podcast? Because I know that's a big passion of yours, and I absolutely love it, and I'm always thrilled to be invited on there every so often. So anything you want to add to the Undercut podcast?
Well, we're going to be back for 23. We're going to have our work cut out for us with everything that's going on with F1, F2, F3, W Series, and F1 Academy, as well as preview episodes. But we're going to work hard. We've got some guests already lined up. We're going to have some old people coming back for a bit more bites from the apple. Yourself will probably be included, because we'll need someone for F3 at the very least. And
ready and waiting.
To keep building on it and improving on it. And very much the same thing for the Nitro RX podcast that I also do with one of the guests that I have on I've forgotten which podcast I'm on now. On the Kerbs. There we go. So it's going to happen at some point. Nabila Teshba, talked to her back in May, June time, I think, and then we started off a Nitro RX podcast, and we've been able to get some great guests on there, and we've got plenty more lined up. So I'm just going to keep building and do it Terminator 2 style, bigger and better.
Bigger and better is always the way to go, but hopefully not as big as the F1 calendar, because that is getting far too big. That's getting way too big. We'll cut that down. When me and Thiemo are in charge, our F1 pledge is, our manifesto is less races, more fun, Andretti, Ricciardo champion. That's it. That's all we pledge. 4 simple promises, not too much to ask for. And that's, on that note, that brings us to the end of what was the 100th episode of On the Kerbs. I really hope you've enjoyed it. Thiemo, it's been fantastic, isn't it, to talk motorsport with you? What a way to celebrate 100 episodes. Sadly, me and Thiemo don't have a bottle of champagne to open, but we would do if we had one. That's, I guess, the way you'd celebrate 100 episodes, or we'll stand on a podium somewhere. But I've been Jacob Phillips, and I've been thrilled and delighted to be invited as the host of On the Kerbs today. Thank you for having me, Thiemo. I hope you've enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, it's been pretty odd to be on the other side of it, but it's been enjoyable, and glad that I got you on to be the host for it. So it's been done a very good job studying for me today, so I very much appreciate that, and fun chatting about it and looking back a bit. It's kind of very odd there were 100 episodes, so it'd be interesting to see how long it takes to get to 200 and beyond there. So let's see what happens 2023 onwards. But yes, very much enjoyable. So thank you for being here today, Jacob, and everyone else listening back wherever you are. Then hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Go check out all of my other podcast and motorsport articles in the description below, and I'll be back with some brand new episodes on the Kerbs in 2023.